Welcome, I'm Kira Carey, and this is Cloudsmith's webinar on all things supply chain security and artifact management. Cloudsmith is the only cloud-native universal artifact management platform for securely developing and distributing your software. So today's topic is on how to securely consume open source, and we'll be joined today by Adrian Mote from Chainguard. And we want to hear your questions, so please post them in your channels no matter where you're listening. And I'll try to get through them. I'm terrible at multitasking, but I'll make a really good effort. So when we talk software, open source it's like 85% of your code contains open source. So your software supply chain includes all your steps involved in deploying your code to production, your closed source software, your in-house software, your dependencies, which are likely to be open source, where you host and consume your open source from those public repositories, and where it gets deployed to production, some machines, some cloud somewhere. And there's plenty of risks in your supply chain. The attack surface is quite large. And so we should be worried about supply chain attacks, and because they've grown exponentially over the last few years. These software supply chain attacks can target any of the steps involved in your software supply chain. You can have compromised repositories where people are sourcing their open source packages from. You can have compromised dependencies of those packages. You can have malicious packages or typo-squat packages. And it can also be compromise how the packages are built or distributed. And there's also, over the last few years, there's been an increased regulatory scrutiny emerging on organizations. They have to prove they know what's in their software supply chain. It all started kind of with that White House executive order. Like whenever we talk about supply chain, we always talk about this White House executive order, but also the EU's Cyber Resilience Act and previously the NIS2 directive, the UK's NIS regulations. So all of these require customers, organizations have a better understanding of what is in their software supply chain, the ingredients of your software supply chain. So how do organizations reduce their risk in their open source and secure their open source, securely consume open source? Well, I suppose it's a big problem. You need people, you need a culture, you need policies, you need processes, and today we're going to talk about some of them. So let's bring Adrian on stage. Hey, Adrian, how are you?
Hi there, I'm very good. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, delighted to have you. I actually met Adrian last week at KubeCon, which was I had a great time there. How did you get on?
Yeah, it was great. It's a great conference. I think it was 12,000 people or so. So it was
Yeah, that's insane.
very
Yeah,
big.
and you had a talk. You were like on the massive stage, the keynote stage. I would have been pretty terrified, but you were cool and calm.
Thank you. I wasn't meant to be on the keynote stage. I got moved room at the last minute, so it was an experience.
I wonder if they did that because like people were adding you to their
Yeah,
schedules. They were like, "We gotta get this guy on." Yeah. Okay.
no, it
Cool.
was that they knew the room was going to be oversubscribed.
Oh, it wasn't like a mistake then. Don't you were like you were meant to be there. You were always meant to be there. So, Adrian is developer relations in Chainguard, and Chainguard is sorry, like my notes are gone. But Chainguard is a company involved in securing the supply chain. It has like all the top heads from Google coming in, and they created this company a few years ago. And out of this, a product called Chainguard Images got created. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So Chainguard images are basically secure minimal container images. Yeah, the main thing is they have much less known CVEs. So if we go and talk about, scanning software like, I think you use Trivy inside Cloudsmith, but there's also stuff like Sneak and Gripe and so on. And if you
Yeah.
run that on the average container image, it tends to have quite a lot of results. And basically, we just created container images that aim to have zero results. They're not always perfect, but a lot of our images, if you scan them at a minute, you'll find there's zero known. vulnerabilities, whereas other similar images may have considerably more.
Yeah, and originally you had another product, but Chainguard images really became the focus of Chainguard.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, we always had Chainguard images, to be fair.
Okay.
It possibly took us a little bit longer to get that product to market because we had to first create an operating system called Wolfie. Um,
Easy peasy.
yeah, well, I shouldn't say operating system, Linux distribution called Wolfie. And we needed to do that for several reasons, but it was kind of essential for us to be able to create our own minimal images and also to issue security advisories. So what you'll find is one of the reasons that we're able to have zero CVEs according to the scanners is that, say there's a vulnerability that's a false positive. It's something that doesn't actually affect our images. We can issue an advisory that basically says, "Hey, this is a false positive." The scanners picked it up and they don't flag on it in our images anymore.
And why would you consider that to be a fault? Is it because it doesn't touch that bit of code, or you're configured
So,
so that you?
yeah. So there's multiple reasons. Because we supply the container image and it can be used in different ways, we're probably unlikely to say, that bit of code's present, but it can't be reached because it's still kind of present, I guess. But if that bit of code isn't present, but it may be present in other versions of the software, then we could, for example, say that. I think possibly the most common reason is, I shouldn't say that, there's a bunch of different reasons, but one of the more common reasons is, say you have an upstream project that's for example, a Go project,
Hmm.
and there's a vulnerability in it, but it's not in the code for the project itself, it's actually in one of the project's dependencies. Well, that upstream project might not issue a new release for that vulnerability because it's not in their code. So, there's no new feature to release, for example. And they probably would if it was significant enough. But for a lower vulnerability, the lower class of vulnerability, they may not. So what we would do is we would actually upgrade that, the Go mod file and change the dependency in our build and release a new version ourselves. And that's another case where we'd issue a security advisory, basically saying, "Hey, we have bumped this, so that vulnerability is no longer present."
Oh, cool. And so you also include a lot of like provenance data into your images. Is that's a big part of your offering? What kind of stuff is that?
That's a good question. So, I mean, that comes back to where we start from. I'm not sure I actually properly answered your first question. So, yeah, we did have another product which was Enforce, but and that was to do with like insurance security policies were met.
Okay.
So it was very what's the word? It worked well with our images, but in the end, we felt that we want to focus on one product at the minute. So we're focused entirely on container images currently. Um, Sorry, what was the question again? I skipped back. Oh,
It's about
provenance.
provenance,
Yes.
provenance, and I
Right.
suppose that's why you linked it to your
You're right.
policy manager. Yeah, I can
Exactly.
totally. Yeah,
So, like, the policy manager could say, "Hey, I only want to run images that I know where they came from, that are signed by the person that created them," for example.
yeah.
And so all our images, they're all signed using the Sigstore project, and you can verify the signatures using tools like Cosign.
Oh,
And
cool.
basically, what that will prove is that the image you're looking at was the same image that we built. So nobody's tampered with it or changed things in it, for example, either like in the registry or when it was transported.
And
Um,
has the industry coalesced around cosign? Because I hear stuff about notary as well, and sometimes we're always wondering what horse to back in Cloudsmith. We do support cosign, but we're like, oh, should we also do notary? Should we do this? Is it still in flux?
you're asking all the difficult questions.
I'm sorry, at the
No,
start.
you're okay. It's so I'm a Docker captain, and Notary is largely used by Docker. Um, well, it was used by Docker. They now moved to Open PubKey, so it gets even more complicated.
Yeah. Oh, we need
But there
another.
is Microsoft and AWS, I believe, are using Notary. Honestly, like Chainguard are very involved in Sigstore, so I'm a bit biased on that count, and I would I would definitely be looking at Sigstore first. One of the things I like most is that the keyless signing, which I think is also possible with Open PubKey in a slightly different mechanism.
Okay.
But keyless signing is really nice. So basically, when you sign your image, you don't have to create this. Traditionally, what you would do is create a public-private key pair, and you'd have
Mm.
to keep your private key completely secure. And if that was ever leaked, then people could sign the images and pretend to be you, and you'd have a very, very bad day, or
Yeah.
bad months probably.
Yeah.
Um, so what we have in Sigstore is keyless signing, and that's really nice. There are options to use traditional signing as well, but if you have keyless signing, it's really nice for smaller projects. So I don't have to have this long-lived private key. What will happen is when I sign my artifact, it'll ask me to log into an OpenID provider like Google or so on, and it'll use that to basically bootstrap the trust, if you like. And it'll create a temporary private key based on that, and it will store the fact that this happened also gets stored in what's the word?
Oh, full, oh,
Record, which is
record,
exactly,
yeah.
which is a timestamp towards the. I can't remember the technical name.
Yeah.
Sorry, you caught me. I wasn't
I
expecting to go on the Sig
know.
store, but yeah, I really like Sig store. That's the one I know most about. But it's probably worth keeping an eye on Notary and Open PubKey as well. I'm definitely not going to say they're bad projects or anything.
Yeah. And now Docker with a new different format. Who I'm but I think Sixdoor has really in the open source world, that's what's really been embraced. It's like being used by most of the well-known open source packages.
Honestly, what I would really like to see happen is more people verify signatures, regardless of like where they're from and who created them. I'm not sure that happens as much as it should.
Yeah,
And that
signing
was
for signing's sake probably it doesn't really get you anywhere unless you have some sort of verification in your pipeline or something like that.
precisely. There's no point in signing things if nobody checks the signature. Um, and that's where things like Enforce come in, but also there's other projects like OPA, Kyverno, and so
Kyverno,
on,
yeah.
and those can be used to check signatures. And I guess I'm sure Cloudsmith does something there as well.
Well, yes, we sign everything that's pushed to Cloudsmith,
Right.
and so people can verify in our packages in our policy manager at the moment. I can't remember if we verify who has signed it, but that if it's not in our product at the moment, it's definitely on our roadmap. It's the kind of thing a policy manager should have.
Yeah. And on that topic, there's also other attestations you can add to images. And one of those that's quite common or common for our images, excuse me, is the SBOM or software bill of materials. So all our images also come with a software bill of materials that fully describes all the software in the image and the versions, which I think probably touches on the points you're making in the intro about regulation.
Yes, yeah, and I think it is kind of honing images seem to be the place where S-bombs will start off. But also, you can host them on using Cosine, right? So it's kind of like that's always where to put your S-bomb and how to connect it to the actual package or image is still a problem for other ecosystems.
Yeah. So with Cosine, it's really nice. It's quite simple to upload an attestation, and also there's a cosine copy command which takes care of copying your signatures and other attestations along with the image, so you can copy it securely between registries without losing that provenance details.
Cool. And so the title of it is like how to securely consume open source. And do you think like focusing on that ingestion is really important for organizations, or it's like before it gets into your supply chain, it's like
Yeah.
it's always a good time to put a lot of attention into what's coming into your supply chain.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I can, take a step back, you touched on a lot of this in your intro, but I was thinking about it prior to our call, and there was a lot of different challenges like around
Yeah.
consuming open source and ingestion. So like some open source projects become unmaintained, and unmaintained software is just going to it's just going to accumulate vulnerabilities. But also, and there's no one to go to to fix it. You can fork it, but that's a huge responsibility.
Yes.
And so what you end up having to do, or the best solution for most people, is to move to a different solution that is maintained. But then if you're talking about, a large framework, that's a lot of work. Um, so I think that's one of the biggest problems is like, how do you know if your software is maintained and is going to continue to be maintained?
And just on that, I'm sure it's an awful lot of work for Chainguard at the moment to make sure all these vulnerabilities are fixed. Do you think in the future that maybe AI could be used to help with this? To like at least maybe, oh, there's this bug was found here. Maybe we can find that same bug in a similar place, or maybe something around what uh, what version it's fixed in, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of looking at this internally already.
Oh, cool.
It's yeah. So personally, I see AI as a sort of tool that you can use to help guide things, but I don't really see it being let to go off and do its own thing too much. I think it generally is always going to need to be guided or to help guide people, if you like. But I think the suggestion you had there was, well, hang on, if you can identify a pattern, or if AI can help you identify a pattern of types of bugs, then you can find it in a whole bunch of other software. So I think that's definitely
Yeah,
one approach.
help you
Um,
to prioritize anyway what to work on.
yeah, well, I mean that's another topic with the NVD problems at the minute that we're seeing.
Oh gosh, yeah, that's another pothole to. So if you haven't heard, the whole basis of vulnerability management is kind of based on this major vulnerability database, the MVD database. And since February, the organization that hosts it hasn't been. You can submit a CV, but there's no score associated with it. And this score is really important when you're trying to prioritize what vulnerabilities to fix. So it's like a huge problem. And I don't think we know why they haven't fixed it yet or when it's going to be solved. Is that kind of where we are?
I think so. I think another part of the problem is that the CPE, like the data for matching, like saying, okay, this vulnerability affects this software package from this version to this version. I think that's also not getting added for whatever reason. And there have
Yeah.
been some reports on blogs and so on, and I'm sure I read something saying they're going to come out with a statement, but I don't think a statement's ever happened. My
Yeah.
best understanding is that it's actually not a budget problem, but some problem in their underlying software that it sounded
Oh,
complex.
I didn't know that. I really didn't think it was going to be a software problem. I thought it was going to be like a people problem or a budget problem.
I think
But,
it's like a out of date database or something like that. I think
oh
there's
no.
some fundamental issues, but we'll see.
Okay.
We'll find out
Yeah.
eventually, I guess.
Yeah, well, I suppose, eventually, it would be great that if there was a global database.
Yeah, right. So
Oh,
NVD is national, as in United States of America.
yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a
So this is a different
interesting point.
webinar. This is a
Yes.
different
Well, that's true. But I think that's, you're hitting on a very good point, and we need a better solution in the future. That's going to take time, and I don't know what it is.
Yeah, me neither. But I'll try to move on. So I'm gonna,
Well, we can talk about the other challenges. So that's kind of where I was
okay.
trying to go. So as well as like unmaintained software, one thing that happens a lot is people get stuck in old versions of software and they don't update. And you'll see like sometimes, the latest stable is one version, but like the more popular version is the version before that may not even be as maintained. And I think that's a big issue. Again, you can have the same problem. Like if it's a large framework, it might be a lot of work to move from one version to another. But when you don't update and you don't move versions, that's when you tend to find your software gets more and more, or less and less secure, and more vulnerable.
And then it's
Um,
more and more difficult to update
yeah,
because you're likely to break something, and then you need more downtime
yeah,
to
it's
deal
just
with it.
yeah, there's a whole lot of technical debt there. Yeah. Typo squatting, you mentioned that one. That one's the
Yeah.
typo squatting and repo jacking and attacks like that are becoming
Oh,
more and
what's
more common.
repo jacking? I don't know if I know this one.
Let me see if I get it right. I think that's so like say a company gives up its rights to a repository and then because they no longer produce software, they no longer use that
Okay.
package manager, then somebody else comes along and steals that. So a bit
Oh,
like when you can steal a domain name. Is that
okay,
domain
okay.
jacking? I'm not sure. Anyway, so the same sort
It's
of idea. Basically, something that was once trusted, an organization or a repo, is now untrustworthy and malicious. But how do you know that? And similar with typo squatting, that's when you you put you spell the name of your package wrong, and Redis-pi instead of pi-redis, or the other way around, or whatever it is, and you get something that looks right, but is actually malicious. Or it may not even be malicious at this point in time, but at some point in time, the attacker pushes some code that makes it malicious and starts an attack. So that's another big one. But one thing that I was thinking about recently, and that's become really big recently, is like companies or projects changing license, because that's a big source of
yes.
problems for companies that are using open source. If the license suddenly changes, can they still use it? And so
Yes.
we've seen like Terraform and Redis and Teleport recently all changed license. And in a lot of cases, you're probably okay, but in some cases, it's annoyingly vague. Like, are you a competitor to Terraform? I mean, I can't tell you.
Yeah, actually, we have a policy manager, which we extract all the licenses from your open source or from whatever code is pushed to Cloudsmith, and you can have a policy against that. So you can say, I don't want GPL licenses or something like that in your build. But then you need to find your new. Then you have to replace your package. So that's only the start of the problem.
So I ran away with your questions. We move on.
Yeah. So today I was like, look, over the last while, I've been thinking like, what are the best practices for securely consuming open source? And SASA is a really big one that really focuses on your build. But there's another one that kind of which you can use hand in hand with SASA called S2C2F. And it's secure supply chain consumption framework. I had to read that. We actually had a webinar on it a few months ago, and we had Adrian Diglio. We have all the Adrians on this webinar.
Brilliant.
And he is from Microsoft, and it came from Microsoft and how they handle, how they want to consume open source securely. And they donated this framework to OpenSSF. So I thought it was a good one to concentrate on. So I'm going to go through that today. There's like 8 practices that organizations should use, and then there's 4 levels. So it incrementally gets more and more secure as the levels go on. So we have at level 1, it really focuses, well, the practices are ingestion, how you consume your open source, inventory, what you're using, updates so that you're hopefully automatically updating your vulnerabilities, at least using some dependabot or something. Enforcement, how do you enforce the developers are doing what you want them to do? Auditing, so that they're consuming open source from an approved ingestion method. You're scanning for vulnerabilities, for malware, and then eventually you get to the stage where you can rebuild on trusted infrastructure with provenance data that can be verified. And actually, the highest level is like you have the potential to fix an upstream, like actually fork it and fix it when necessary for a temporary fix, while a 0-day vulnerability, maybe if this was on a critical system or something like that, this would not be, day-to-day thing on any old project. But because I know forking has its it's not great to fork and then not bring it back to the upstream. But that's the highest level for, I don't know, submarines or something. So level 1, I'll just talk about it because I know we're actually running out of time. Level 1 is like, some of the requirements are, they encourage you to, it's like basically, where are you getting your open source from? They're trying to encourage you to tie that down. So you're always using package managers, which is a reproducible way to discover and to consume and update your open source. And also package managers and package formats have extra stuff and more stuff about provenance in them. Some package managers, you can actually include an SBOM. You can include your you can sign with package ecosystem specific stuff. So it's really important to use package manager. Also, they want you to cache your open source somewhere, like Cloudsmith. You can add an upstream and proxy and cache it. They want you to scan for known vulnerabilities, for licenses, and they want you to have a good idea of to know your inventory of the software that you're using. So like knowing what you're using is actually like a critical baseline that you to establish where you are, so you can detect and fix issues that can help you reduce that risk on your software supply chain. And that inventory, that's kind of associated with your SBOM, your software bill of materials. And the first level, you could just do manual open source updates, but as the levels go on, they expect you to have automatic update capabilities in your, like, so it would automatically open a PR in your code base, something like that with Dependabot. The next level is to securely consume and have an improved mean time. What is it? MTTR. What's that stand for again? Mean time to resolution, or does that sound? So
Mean
that's
time
all
to
about,
something. Repair, I
yeah.
think.
So that's focusing on updating your vulnerabilities and fixing them and having that automatic update capability. The next level will be level 3. So you have like, it's more proactive. You might have the potential to mirror your open source internally, to build it yourself if necessary, and to create that provenance data that you can enforce and also verify. And they also expect you to enforce where your developers are consuming their open source from. So we're talking about policy manager kind of capabilities there, but also we're talking that provenance data that you were talking about, those signatures, creating those signatures, but then also verifying them, the hard part. And then that level 4 is what I was talking about before, where you actually have the capability. If a 0-day vulnerability comes in, you have the capability to quickly fork it, fix it before the upstream. If the upstream is delayed in fixing it, that you would have that in-house capability to fork. Now, that is kind of on another level, I suppose, but it wouldn't be appropriate for most cases. But that's where this framework comes up. And so Cloudsmith kind of nicely aligns with that, because there's a lot of talk about, package managers. Cloudsmith supports all your package formats from your npm to your pip, talking about caching your open source. And we have upstreams where you can cache and proxy your open source. And actually we can now do that with Chainguard, which is kind of cool. We scan everything that's pushed to Cloudsmith, including your open source that's cached and proxied. And now we have a policy manager on top of that. So against your licenses, against your vulnerabilities. And also a new thing is we have a policy manager for your deny rules. So if a log4j came in, you could say, oh, I don't know what to do, but I'm just going to bar it from anywhere in my software supply chain, and might give you a little bit of time before you can update your packages. Yeah, so that's where we are. We have your ingestion, your scanning, your we are, like, another key thing is Cloudsmith provides that one place for you to have all your open source, to have all your closed source software in one place, where it gives you that vulnerability, visibility to everything that's in your supply chain. And it's like kind of that single place to for policy enforcement, for scanning, and to implement controls on your open source. So we scan, we help you ingest, we help you scan, we enforce them with our policy manager, and we also sign everything that's pushed to Cloudsmith. So then you can extract that and verify it. Yeah, so we do a lot of stuff to kind of help people to align with that best practice of S2C2F, to securely consume your open source. So yeah, so do those steps ring true to you?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I have to say I've not looked at that standard very
Yeah.
much. Oh, by the way, if there's some background noise, it's raining, which you can hear quite
I
loudly.
actually
So
can't hear
apologies.
it. I can't hear it. It's the mic is working.
Good. What I would say is, yeah, we do a lot of that internally ourselves. So like, we're keeping all our packages up to date. And if you're a customer, you buy our production images, we provide you for an SLA. So we'll guarantee to fix the, critical and high vulnerabilities within a given time period. I can't remember the exact period off the top of my head, but yeah, so we can help you do a lot of that work towards S2, C2, F.
Yeah. When I think about Chainguard, I think it seems to align nicely with your vision.
Yeah. So I guess I should talk a little bit about
Yeah,
the vision, if that's okay.
please.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think our tagline currently is the safe source for open source, which I really like, because that gives you an idea of like not just what we do at the minute, but also what we can do in the future and what we hope to do. So we really want to be like sort of part of the solution alongside companies like Cloudsmith, for helping companies to trust and safely use open source software. But at the minute, like as we said already, we're hyper focused on Chainguard images, which is our low CVE, minimal, secure container images. And yeah, we've got images for stuff like Java, Node, Python, all the sort of programming languages.
Yeah.
And you can use those images to build your own software on top of. But we also have application images, so things like Nginx and Redis, and databases like Postgres, MySQL, that you can use sort of out of the box and should be drop-in replacements. But our images tend to be much smaller than competitors' images, and also much less CVEs, and that's what we really aim for. Yeah, and yeah, as you mentioned there as well, SBOM. So like all our stuff comes with SBOM, so you should get a full list of all the software in the image, and those SBOMs are created when we build our images, so
Oh,
they
cool.
should be
That's meant to
pretty
be the
complete.
the sweet time to build your SBOM, isn't it? Like app build time.
Yeah, because you have all the information then, right? Otherwise, you've got to go. A lot of SBOMs at the minute are created by sort of looking at the package manager, which
Yes,
works, but by that point, you've already lost some of the information.
of course. Yeah. And can I ask, on do you expect developers to use Chainguard images to build, or is it production environment ready? Who is the kind of type of person that, where is it deployed to, or
Yeah, both. You're
yeah.
quite right. So like we have developer images. So we have like Java, Node, Python images, and there's tutorials on how to use them on our website and so on. And by default, if you download like we have a developer tier of images that's completely free to use. And so if you download something like our Python latest image, what you'll find is that's a minimal image. It's really meant for production usage. So it won't have, for instance, like a shell or a package manager. But
Okay.
there's a latest -dev variant that you can use in development. And that does have things like a
Oh
package
yeah, because
manager
that's worse
functionality.
when you're working in development and you don't have a shell. I'm like, oh, I'm going home.
Yeah, it's the same with ops. Like they want to be able to get variants that they can test out and investigate.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Okay. And so, uh, how do you actually? What are the nuts and bolts in actually finding all the vulnerabilities? Is it like just hard graft? Is that?
So we don't do the part of finding vulnerabilities, the same as yourself. So like
Yeah.
we mainly rely on scanners. So we use Gripe internally quite a lot. That's the one from Anchor. It's free
Yeah.
to use. You can check that out. And but Trivy is also a good solution. And then
Yeah.
there's commercial solutions like Sneak and Docker Scout, which are
Yeah. And
also
Aqua as
great.
well, I think, is another one.
Yeah, there's even
Yeah.
more. I forget them all.
Yeah.
Um,
Someone sent me on a new one today. I hadn't heard of as well.
okay. But what I guess I should say is like some people ask us, or they don't believe us, like when we say we have less CVEs than other people, and they think it's a trick. It's absolutely not a trick. There's like kind of a few things we do. So the first one is our images are minimal. We follow what's sometimes called a distroless technique, where the only software in our containers is what's required to run that software. So like in a Redis container, we have Redis, and Redis is dependencies and nothing else.
Okay.
Um, and just by having less software, there's less software to have vulnerabilities. So that's the first thing we do. But the other thing we do is we just keep things really aggressively up to date. Like when an upstream has a new release, we go and grab it immediately. So the median time from like an upstream project releasing something and us having an updated package is about 4 hours. And then the new container image will be the next day. Um, And that, again, you mentioned AI earlier, and we are trying to make use of AI to help us, keep up to date a little bit there. And the last thing, sometimes you still find there's one or two vulnerabilities left, and that's where security advisories and patching comes in. And we talked about that a little bit before. One of the examples being, if you have an upstream project and we want to bump its dependencies to address a vulnerability, it's quite a common case. Or we might say, that's a false positive, and things like that.
Oh, cool. And is there anything that's hard to find? Like, are there any vulnerabilities that are? Because I know I listen to you guys sometimes, and it was like if you use some of these scanners, they actually won't find like really obvious things. Like they won't know that
Right.
node is on your images. And why is that? Or is that true?
It can be true. It depends on the scanner and depends how it works. So it actually goes back to the SBOM thing. Remember, I said a lot of the SBOMs are created by looking at the package manager. So the way most scanners work is they'll create an SBOM or equivalent of an SBOM, and then they'll compare that SBOM to their databases. So the problem is it's only going to be able to compare stuff in that SBOM. And if your SBOM is created from the package manager's database, then you miss software that's been added by other methods. For example, it used to be the case like you wouldn't see vulnerabilities in Redis because the official Redis image from the Docker Hub, they downloaded and compiled that in the Docker file. And that's how it got in there. It didn't come from Alpine's package database. So it wasn't getting included in the SBOM for the scanners, and so they wouldn't pick up vulnerabilities, for example. But all of
Okay,
our software is in the SBOM and therefore should be picked up by the scanners.
cool. And you
Also, I should say, I think in a lot of cases, the scanners are now picking up binaries, and
Oh, okay. How are they? I wonder how they're doing that. I suppose they're just using. Oh, they're checking the file system or something, are they?
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
I think
cool.
with a Go binary, you can also figure out the dependencies and so on. But it depends on the binary, how much information you can extract that way.
Yeah, I sometimes I was much better. I'm gonna start doing it now again. But Open SSF have a software repository working group, and they go through how they're trying to up their game in their ecosystem. So these are the public repositories where many people consume their open source from. And so they're trying to introduce these SBOMs into the package manager themselves. I think Maven is ahead of the game, maybe Go, with actually include, which makes it,
That's right. Okay.
yeah, so it makes it easy once you know where you can store your SBOM. Obviously, Docker images, you can store them using Coastline. But if you know where to store your SBOM and it's like beside the package itself, it makes things a lot more usable.
Yeah, sure. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
And have your customers, do they have are they using SBOMs in their pipeline to verify what they're using, or to what are they using it for?
Right. So this is a question that gets debated a lot on social media. Um, Honestly, I don't personally see SBOMs being used that much. I think they're mainly in response to regulation at the minute.
Yeah,
I think this may be a little bit of a chicken and egg question because until SBOMs cover everything, how useful are they? Um,
like
yeah,
vaccinations or
interesting.
something.
Maybe we'll see.
Yeah. So, and I said earlier that Cloudsmith now supports Chainguard as an upstream. So if you're using Cloudsmith, set up your Docker images to point to Chainguard's endpoint, and you can consume them that way, which is kind of a nice thing to have. Bring everything into one place, kind of thing. Well, let's see. We're coming to the end of the show. I'm going to see if there's any questions. Okay, there's just like emojis. I don't really know how to. I'm not sure how to answer that, but much appreciated. I'll just check LinkedIn because I think the they go into the chat there. Okay, let's see. Oh no, it's just a lot of thanks and that kind of thing. So I think we're good to go. I hope we've helped people understand the importance of securely consuming your open source, and we've introduced you to the best practices for consuming your open source securely. Like know what's in your software supply chain, to make a big effort that when new open source is being brought in, that you're trying to use something with low or no vulnerabilities, that you're really interrogating it at that first point. And then also that you're using these S2C2F practices to securely consume your open source. You're using a central place to consume everything, including your closed source, like an artifact management like Cloudsmith. You're caching and you're proxying them from public repositories to protect yourself from certain types of attacks and from reliability issues, that you're scanning and that you're applying controls and you're creating provenance and then also verifying it. So it's a journey, and you can make it easier by consuming these low vulnerability images from Chainguard and by using an artifact management system like Cloudsmith. So I implore you, I implore, I encourage you to explore Cloudsmith and Chainguard to enhance the security of how you consume open source in your organization. So thanks, Adrian. It was thanks so much for coming on the show, and it was great to meet you last week.
Yeah, fantastic. Many thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. And our next webinar is going to be with the Financial Times, and we're going to go through how they responded to the Circle CI breach by moving away from those long-lived tokens that were breached in the Circle CI issue, and that moving to Open ID. Oh gosh, Open ID. What is it called? OPDID.
OIDC,
Oh,
yeah.
OIDC. I
That's
was
what I
saying
meant to
all.
say earlier. I just said OpenID, actually. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I was correcting you. So yeah, tune in for the next webinar. And again, thank you so much, Adrian.
No, you're very welcome.
Bye bye.
So